Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen, to Street Apologists Live. I'm your host, Vocab Malone, and this is the Christian Urban Apologetics program where we serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. And I'm excited about today's program, even though it is kind of a weird topic. I almost don't even really want to visit this, but I think it calls for visitation, as it were. Let me give a little bit of backdrop while you guys are coming in, and I hope that you are hitting the like button. I hope that you are subscribing to the channel. I hope that you are hitting the bell. I hope you are doing all the things that you are supposed to do. So let's talk about this briefly. Was the failed Austrian painter a Christian? That's the question we're going to ask today. You know, the tiny mustache man, A.H. Well, I remember when I was getting into early Christian apologetics online, as far as that goes, and I saw a lot of our atheist friends saying this back then. And they would bring up certain things, which we're going to talk about today, and there were some good answers, you know, as the conversations developed. Honestly, I always felt like it was sort of a cheap shot, you know, something that was just a distraction, and I don't even know if these guys really thought it, you know, type of thing. But one of the people that really tussled with these early kind of neo-atheists who were running around in those days of the internet was J.P. Holding, James Patrick Holding of Tecton Apologetics. And I always thought, you know, he does a good job on that topic. And I thought it was kind of put to bed, you know. The materials are there, the resources are there, and the Christians, I think, had beaten the atheist on that topic, hands down. The man was not a Christian by any sense of the word. Well, you can imagine my chagrin and my surprise when I see Christians, pun intended, resurrecting this old canard. And I'm going to go ahead and say Christians resurrecting this Christians resurrecting this canard about tiny mustache man in Germany being a Christian. And I said, wait a minute, wait. These guys are arguing for it. Now, granted, everybody that I see primarily on X, Twitter, banding about memes related to this and quotes related to this, they don't necessarily all fully say, oh, he was definitely a Christian. Now, some do straight out, right? But you get the other ones that are just like, well, he wasn't such a bad guy, and he wasn't so opposed to Christian principles, and da-da-da, you know, kind of, you know the word, what do they, playing footsie with the idea that, oh, really? And I said, wait a minute, a long time ago, didn't we already beat the atheist on this topic? And now we got only to find people that call themselves Christians running around saying the same thing. I'm like, what is... So I said, you know what? I got to call JP Holding. I got to get a hold of JP. I always felt like he did a great job on this. And I want you to ask any questions that you have to him. You know, go ahead and drop them in there, and I'll try to get questions to him. Have you heard people say this? I want to know. Have you heard this idea? Now, if you haven't, you're still, I think, appreciate today's topic, because we're going to get into apologetics and history. El Cacho says, not that weird. I used to believe the topic. I don't even remember where I heard it from. So this is, I believe, a Christian brother who thought it was the case that the man was a Christian. So, wow. Okay. Edwin Kelly says a dead person can't be anything but dead. Yes, we understand. We understand. I guess he has a problem with the tenses I used in some point there. Okay, well, it works. It's fine. Shout out to David from AZ. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring up today's very special guest. I was giving him time, you know, to do things like get a drink of water and, you know, fun stuff like that. But don't worry, he's coming on. If you guys don't know who he is, you should, and you'll know after today. Welcome to Street Apologist Live, the one and only J.P. Holding. How you doing?
Hello.
Yes,
How you
sir.
doing today?
Doing
all right. Thanks for having me today.
You remember those days when you beat up the atheists on this topic?
I've done it twice. I did it in the 90s once, and I did it in 2014. And it's like you say, there's no horse so dead that someone won't resurrect it, get on it, and ride it across the finish line and claim to have won.
Yeah, I think you're right. What happened in the 90s with this topic? I actually didn't know about that one.
Well, no, this was even before I was on the internet. I just did a lot of personal research on it, on the topic. Of course, there wasn't as much available. There's not as many scholarly works available on the subject, and so I didn't get as much depth as I would have liked. But I did address some people's objections in that regard. But just around 2014, I remembered having done it before, and I thought, well, maybe this is a good time to quote resurrect the issue in my own life and do more up-to-date research. And one of the things that inspired me, frankly, is not Christians who said that Hitler was a Christian, but Christian ministers who did a thoroughly incompetent job of debunking the notion that Hitler was a Christian. And I'm thinking particularly of Erwin Lutzer, who wrote a book on Hitler, and it was just so poorly done. And there's so many others that were so poorly done back in the 80s as well and further on that I felt there was something more professional and more accurate needed out there. And so that's why I went ahead with doing the ebook I eventually put out called Hitler's Christianity. And that's been out there for a while, of course. A somewhat shortened version was used as an article in the Christian Research Journal after that. It's still going, and I reviewed it recently to see if I needed to put anything new in there, but doesn't seem to be. But this might warrant a slight update if this is becoming a trend.
Well, hopefully we can, as Barney Fife used to say, I think he was the one who said it, nip it in the bud.
That's it. He's the man.
Have you debated this topic formally, JP? Hitler's Christianity?
I never actually did, certainly not on a stage with someone verbally. I didn't actually debate anyone in writing about it. It just seemed like a very good topic and it interested me greatly since I had done the research before. And it also so happens that being in Orlando, I'm very close to one of the premier libraries collections for Holocaust history. There's library. There's a synagogue or a Jewish school nearby that has a special library devoted to the topic of the Holocaust, and so they had several books there that were not normally available at public libraries or anywhere else, and I was able to make use of those. So it's a good opportunity.
There's your book. I put it on the screen there. Hitler's Christianity. People can grab it on Amazon, and it's a pretty good book. I own it myself, and I encourage people to grab it, especially in light of today's topic. Okay. Now, let's talk about this. Why do people say he was a Christian? I've got a couple live chatters who want to comment on that real quick. One guy says, his speeches sound a lot like Trump's. So not the Trump part, but the fact that what's interesting is there's these accounts now, JP, especially on Acts, where people are going around and they're translating. It's like a trend to translate his speeches in English and then put them on little clips there, And El Cacho says the way I heard it was not everybody who calls himself Christian. Hitler called himself a Christian besides obviously not being one. Well, I don't know. Did he really? Let's find out. Let's find out.
Yeah.
And then Jonathan Lewis says, have you actually done any real study on this topic? Did any of you research on the topic of Hitler's connection with the Catholic Church? Jay Fry points out he was an occultist. And let's stop right there and let you comment already. Here we go. Why do people say what's popping?
Yeah. All right. Well, we can start with the idea. Well, yes, he did claim to be a Christian. And at the start of my book, and I could spend an hour just relating the first chapter of the book. But so everything you hear that I'm going to say here is going to be a summary. And if you want the depth, you're going to have to go there and have a look at it. But there are several places, several speeches where he made clear, and in his writings, where he said that he was a Christian, that he self-identified as one. One of the favorite quotes to this effect is, "My feelings as a Christian points me to my Lord and Savior as a fighter." Okay. And I also said in the same paragraph, where as a Christian, I have also a duty to my own people. All right. So there's no question. We can't deny that he made this self-identification as a Christian. All right. Okay. Now, let me just go ahead and nip the bud here, nip Barney and bud while we got a moment. Let me explain what he actually was saying and what he actually meant by that. In much the same way that someone who's a part of a pseudo-Christian cult like the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons may say they are Christians. Their beliefs simply do not match with the historic Christian faith that you found in the first century. There are simply too many variations. For the use of the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, they believe in what is regarded as a heresy called Arianism, which asserts that Jesus was a created being, that Jesus was not eternal, but that at some point in time, God created Jesus, and that he is just a created being sort of like you or me, just more powerful, shall we say. Mormonism does not believe in the Trinity, or at least that's the standard teaching of the church. Everyday street Mormons may actually believe in the Trinity, which is kind of odd, but that's another story, another show. What Hitler believed in doesn't actually exist as a cult today, but it would have been regarded as a cult in its own time. If Walter Martin had been around, he would have included a chapter on this system in Kingdom of the Cults. There's a quote where Hitler refers to something called positive Christianity, and that confuses some people because we have people like Zig Ziglar who refer to positive Christianity, but it's not the same thing. Zig Ziglar was talking about this positive thinking kind of stuff. What Hitler was referring to was a movement that began in Germany in the mid-1800s and came to be known as positive Christianity. And it had several very important differences from the historic Christian faith that would have turned it into what we would call a cult. I'll summarize just the 3 points where they differed significantly with the historic Christian faith. Number one, they did not believe that Jesus was a Jew. They rejected any idea that Jesus was Jewish. Instead, he was white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, so to speak, but not quite Protestant yet.
They considered Jesus Aryan.
Yes,
no?
Aryan. Yes, and that's in that. I should explain that's not the same as the Arian heresy, which is Arian. We don't want to.
Yeah, this is more like Aryan Nation, like the guys in the California prisons. Those types. At least that's where they got their name from. And
exactly.
You know, one thing on that, JP. I know you're going to go on. Don't let me cut in too much. But I remember I saw that one of Hitler's apparently favorite Bible stories was where Jesus went into the temple and drove out the money changers because he saw it as an example. And I'm just telling you, this is what Adolf said, of Jesus fighting against money grubbing, cheating, selfish, irreligious Jewish people. And so he saw the Aryan Jesus going against them, and then he basically thought, is my understanding, Jesus was martyred and couldn't complete the job of standing up against the money-grubbing, self-centered, greedy Jewish people, but that he liked that story. So it's like, what Jesus does he believe in? But go ahead.
Well, and that fits in with the next 2 points. There was points of difference. They also believed in what I call a Bowdlerized Bible, an edited Bible that rejected all of the Old Testament, basically, and a good chunk of the New Testament. And in that respect, this positive Christianity was similar to a heresy of the 2nd century called Marcionism. And you may remember the heretic Marcion rejected most or all of the Old Testament and rejected all the New Testament except Paul. And so he had his own little Bible. He just sort of set out the parameters for what he wanted to be in the Bible, and the rest of it got tossed out. The third variation was that there was a very strong emphasis on works and performance as opposed to faith or belief. And you were expected to act out what you believed in. You're expected to be dedicated to the cause and show your dedication to the cause. That's not necessarily a great variation from mainstream Christianity, but the way it's emphasized is. It's something close, maybe not a work salvation, but it's closer to putting works up on a pedestal than it is in mainstream Christianity. So those were the 3 differences between positive Christianity and Orthodox or mainstream Christianity.
Now, have you heard of the quote that they use a lot of times where he was before, I suppose, like the Catholic Teachers Union or something? He said, what Germany needs is Christian education or whatever. Have you seen that one?
I've not seen that particular one, but you can see how that would fit in as well. I mean, he's not going to he would not have, as no Mormon or Jehovah's Witness would, regard themselves as deviant from the mainstream Christian movement. Rather, they believe that they are restoring some mainstream Christianity that existed in the first century and that they're only now revealing. And there are some quotes by him suggesting, hey, we're restoring it to its original intentions with what we're doing with the positive Christian movement. So, so it's not surprising that he might just simply self-identify as a Christian. He's not going to self-identify as a pseudo-Christian or a member of a cultic group. He's going to self-identify as a mainstream.
Yeah, my understanding with that quote, it's like before he's even chancellor, first of all. And of course, people need to remember this he's a politician. And I think 90 some percent, might have even been 95% is the stat that I was familiar with of education in Germany at that time was basically Catholic or Protestant. And so, he's saying that to appeal to a union, which is, I guess, one of the most powerful ones in Germany at the time. And so I think people should remember, he's clearly not above utilizing the language and all that to rise to power. But when you really looked at what he would say, he did not adhere to anything Christian. And I read a couple people have talked about this. The archives from the socialists there that were his buddies, meaning, what did he really say behind closed doors? That he had an intention to essentially eradicate Christianity as it existed in Germany once he came to power. I actually saw that in a William Lane Craig clip, is that was something. Now, have you heard about sort of the difference between what he might say in public and what he said in private in regards to the Christian faith there?
Yeah, now there's some due caution to be had here because a lot of this sentiment comes from a book called Table Talk that supposedly relates some of Hitler's comments while he was in the bunker. There are a lot of questions about how authentic some of that is, whether it was related to us correctly, and it also has to be considered that this was at the very end of Hitler's life. He's very bitter, he's very angry, he's very upset that the churches did not support him more. So we have to take the Table Talk with a bit of a grain of salt, but the sentiments that we can genuinely verify are bad enough. I just found now this quote that I think was the most significant one from him. This was before he became chancellor. The party, speaking of the Nazi party, as such stands for positive Christianity, but does not bind itself in the matter of creed to any particular confession. It combats the Jewish materialist spirit within and without us, and is convinced that our nation can achieve permanent health from within only on the principle, the common interest before self-interest. You can sort of see all three of the points I mentioned in that single quote, sort of condensed into that one quotation from Hitler.
Yeah, and we do know that he did not abide by the confessional church that resisted him. Most prominent example that most people might know is, of course, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Has got a movie coming out this November, actually, on Bonhoeffer. He was one of the folks who, ended up locked away. Now, there was churches who cooperated with him, so we wish more would have resisted, is my understanding. But he opposed sort of the confessional Christianity because they didn't really go along with him. Can you say a little bit about the churches there in Germany at that time?
Yeah. So there was a positive Christian movement, as I mentioned it, and of course there were churches associated with that movement that adhered to the 3 points that I've mentioned. And this group became known according to our historians, as the German Christians. And that's the formal movement associated with this positive Christian cult, shall we say. Now, you mentioned Bonhoeffer. Yeah, that's one example. I mentioned several other examples of people who were fought against Hitler's views on that matter. Not only Bonhoeffer, but Hans and Sophie Scholl would be another good example. They were very brave in their opposition to positive Christianity. And then let me just look here. We have Helmuth James von Moltke. He was also a particularly strong voice against the perversion, really, that was positive Christianity. So there were more than a few people who were standing up against him, to be sure. And this German Christian movement was, you could call it a Bowdlerized form of Christianity as well, to that extent. But it was a separate movement you might call it a deviation mainly from Protestantism, but it was not associated with any other particular movement like the Catholics. It was essentially its own cult within the German church.
I got a couple comments. Briefly respond to these if you can.
Yeah.
Someone asks, if he was a Christian, then why would he have the babies born then baptized in his own name? I can't confirm if that's true. Have you ever heard about that?
I've never heard anything like that. I'd like to see. I never ran across that in any of the works of any of the scholars that I read, any of the
Okay.
German history scholars.
Well,
I'd
that
like.
does.
I'll take, if I may take this moment to recommend a particular scholarly work, because that's where you'll find. There's one in particular that was a great source on this matter. Let's see. So let's look that up. The author's name was Steigmann Gall. I'm going to get the exact title for
How do you
everyone
spell
here.
that? How do you spell that?
Richard, and then Steigmann Gall, Steigmann-Gall. And his book was titled The Holy Reich, Nazi Conceptions of Christianity, 1919 through 1945.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was an excellent. Good. Okay.
Yeah, that was an excellent work on the subject.
And that's what your master's degree is in library science, right?
It is. Yeah. Yep. So I'm good at telling people to be quiet, and I'm good at doing research.
Yeah, because one thing that always impressed me about your work, JP, is your bibliography. You know, you would always find like the best books on whatever the subject was, and they weren't always books that had already been cited by everybody else. You would find some of the best resources, the best books, the best scholars, the best specialists, the best experts. I mean, I remember when I was looking at the Mithra stuff, you just had all these lists of all these folks who specialize in this obscure subject, and even some conferences mentioned and stuff like that. And so I appreciate that. And it looks like you're still doing that type of thing.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of fun to dig around. It's unfortunate that libraries these days seem to not know what books are.
Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about it. One thing about the comment on the screen is that I do understand he himself, of course, was baptized as an infant into the Roman Catholic Church. But even though I'm a Protestant, I'm not going to hold that in and of itself against Rome. I just want to mention that. And then you do have people saying, well, he was an occultist and a Darwinist. He was not Christian, and he was a socialist. You want to comment on any of those?
Okay, well, I can't. Socialist, yes. I mean, it was the National Socialist Party. Obviously, there was socialism has many forms. It's got a wide variety of beliefs associated with it, but this was a form of it. Darwinist, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I didn't really look at that. Occultist is totally wrong. That is completely wrong. The only person who was there was only one person who was into the occult in the Nazi circles, and that was Himmler. But occultism was something Hitler had no patience for that. I have a whole chapter on that subject. There are several people, including Erwin Lutzer, who have been promoting incorrect information, and most of them are using the same questionable sources that claim that Hitler was an occultist. But no, he was not interested in the occult. He did not practice the occult. If anything, he disdained it, and he didn't have time for it.
Gail Drake says Hitler and Himmler practiced the dark arts. You're saying it's just Himmler, though.
Just Himmler. Himmler was the only one who was interested in that kind of thing, and he was pretty. I think you could call him the Barney Fife of the Hitler crew.
Okay. Gail Drake says historian Eric Kurlander has written a book that takes Nazi occultism seriously. They practice the dark arts. You know about this?
I've never heard of him. Let me look him up real quick.
Yeah, no problem.
Stetson University. Well, yeah, that's not far from me. That's where he's from.
Oh yeah. But James says Adolf was maybe in the occult, but definitely not a Christian.
Okay, no, I don't see any. I've never seen anything that verifies. Let me look up Kurlander's book and see what it says here. Hitler's Monsters: A Supernatural History of the Third Reich. Is that the one they're talking about?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what Gail is saying. Perhaps. Real quick, shout out to Jay Fry. Jay Fry is our first and only as of now super chat. So I want to thank you very much, Jay Fry, for the super chat. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. I hear that about him a lot, and I think some of the movies also give that idea about the occult element. From what I understand, and you can correct me, that's why we have you on, is that he did have some sort of I'm going to use the word fascination with Norse kind of proto-Norse pagan mythology. But my understanding is a lot of these guys around him, in a manner of speaking, are what we might call men of science. And so because of that, it doesn't seem like Adolf took the metaphysics seriously of sort of the proto-Norse mythology, but he sort of like the ideals that it embraced and embodied over and against Christianity, which he seemed to view as weak, according to private conversations, such as I think like with one of his secretaries talked about that, for example, and I think that is in line with what he seemed to be in his philosophy, which is very, and I sometimes mispronounce this adjective, but Nietzschean. And I know I said a lot there, but JP, what about his, or what about claims that he was into or fascinated or interested in or wanted to promote sort of proto-Norse pagan mythology?
Yeah, I did see that used to some extent, again, mostly by people like Himmler, and there's some other people I could name, like Alfred Rosenberg. They used it to the effect that it was something that encouraged nationalism, a German nationalism. Of course, that was part of Germany's history. I was looking at Kurlander's descriptions of his book, and it's, I wouldn't. It sounds like he's more more general. He's not specifically saying that Hitler himself was an occultist, but he's saying that it was, there was a broad interest in it around Nazi Germany, which is, that's fine. I mean, yeah, there was probably some of that too, but we're talking about particular people. Like, Himmler was the only one that was really seriously into it among the Nazis, among the Nazi inner circle.
Dunbar says, did not Hitler himself say he made a covenant with Satan?
No. If you have that quote, I want to know where it is.
Right.
I'm guessing it might be on a box of Fruit Loops somewhere, but that's about the only place I can think of that. I certainly never saw it in any of the scholarly works that I read.
King Cadmus says Norse paganism is simply the native custom and religion of the Germanic people. I wouldn't call that occultism. Well,
yeah.
First of all, King, we were differentiating. Hopefully, you're paying attention.
Yeah.
I was differentiating between occultism and what I called proto-Norse paganism, because maybe you could use a different word, but it's interesting. It's like, where would a guy like even get information in the 1930s about what ancient Germanic peoples read, believed? It seems like he might have to read a little bit of Tacitus, but he doesn't say very much about it, and so it's like, I wonder what sources he would be even going to fill in the gaps of his knowledge. But I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I've not heard some of that, but what Kang is saying here, yeah, I mean, there are many people who call that occultism. It's not, and that's again one of the problems I ran into with some of these popular Christian authors. They would think that paganism was the same thing as occultism, and it's really not. There might be some cross fertilization, so to speak, but
right.
It looks like Kurlander, the description says he's talking about supernatural thinking. Well, that's not the same thing as occultism.
Yeah, we'd have to kind of read the book ourselves, instead of just trying to trust in someone's summary of it, I think,
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like it's saying that Hitler was an occultist. It doesn't sound like, from the sound of the description, I wouldn't disagree with it.
I don't think, rest a while, I'm not sure if you understand. After hearing the guest here, let's celebrate H and give him all the glory and praise. Who's saying that?
I don't know anyone who's saying that.
Tell us why Hitler was a bad guy. Can you do that?
All the standard reasons he was a bad guy remain the same. All the horrors he perpetrated. Yeah, I'm not going to give him any praise and glory. I'm going to give him an atomic wedgie and maybe a ticket to hell. That's about it. All the stuff, all the he was the instigator of the wars. He was the one who was conquering people, who was the impetus behind all that. He's the one who was behind the death of millions, in the Holocaust as well as in the wars. I don't know what the final number is, but it's in the millions, and he gets no praise and glory whatsoever. No.
So what I'm getting from some of this to the audience is that I think there's a lot of rumors and innuendo and all kinds of things surrounding this guy, including the idea, in some circles, the idea he was a Christian. But I don't know if people really sourced all this stuff or checked out the claims. And so I feel like a lot of this is just getting up traffic and third-hand rumors and whatnot. But we're trying to have sort of a scholarly precision here, I think. What I have heard an expert on this say is if you wanted to put a religion on him, the closest would be actually pantheism. And what he said is that if you read Mein Kampf, he seems to essentially deify nature. And that's why apparently in a lot of translations of the book into English, and there's more than one that do this, is what I understand, they actually end up capitalizing nature there, capital N, because of that very idea, the way that he seems to almost deify nature, as it were, more than anything else. Ever heard that?
I've not heard that in particular, but I can see how that might fit in. I mean, remember my focus was directly directed to the idea of him as a Christian. Some idea of pantheism wouldn't be beyond the range of positive Christianity, especially with their emphasis on works.
Now, what about this idea? You brought up nationalism, right? My understanding of the belt buckles is it essentially was nationalistic. Can you talk about belt buckles for a second here?
Oh boy, yeah. Okay, so that's a favorite argument that because the Germans had "God with us" on their belt buckles, then
Can you
that
say it? Can you
somehow
say it in German?
got with us, got mit us. I took German, believe it or not, in community college, but
I don't think I believe it. I don't believe it.
yeah, well, I was Florida required everyone to take a foreign language for a semester, and I just picked that because it was the class with the fewest people in it. And I passed because it was graded on a curve. But today, all I can do is tell people that they have a potato for a head in German. That's the only thing I know how to do anymore. But yeah, they had the belt buckles that said "God means us, God with us," but that came from the German military before the Nazi era. They were wearing those in World War I, and so. But of course, when they turned over to positive Christianity, what does God mean in God with us? It means the positive Christian God, not the Orthodox Christian God. They changed God along the personality and beliefs associated with God, along with whatever pseudo Christian belief they happen to be in now.
And so the belt buckles that the German army wore that said "God with us" were already prior used in World War I.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And of course, it's like, what group thinks that they're, fighting, against God? Everyone thinks that God or gods are on their side.
Yeah.
Here's a really weird comment, but since it's a super chat, I'm going to put it on the screen. I think this is a strange comment, but JP, I'll let you take this. Okay. Can you recommend a book about AH not written by a Jew?
I don't even know what these authors are, and I don't see that it makes a difference.
My goodness. Well, this topic, as you probably could imagine, is bringing up a lot of those types of comments. So we'll go into those now. Jews remove the lower half of the plus sign to not remind anyone of Christianity. I think, are we talking about the sign here, the symbol here?
I guess this might be a bad time to note that I'm Jewish on my mother's side.
Hey, it doesn't bother me a bit. I actually never knew that about you. I never knew that about you. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Jonathan Lewis says, you can't change history. The swastika was actually the symbol of Hitler's priest.
No, it wasn't.
Well, tell us what it was. Tell us what it was.
Okay, so let me go to the part of the book where I have that. Okay, so there's two swastika, two versions of the swastika, one that turns in one direction, one that turns in the other direction. And the one that Hitler chose to use, the one that was turned in another direction. So I have a full section on it, but just to sum it up, the way they used it was not related to the occult, and it was not a symbol of their priests. It was like I guess there were swastikas on people's coats of arms in Germany. It was just a symbol of heraldry at the time, not a symbol of a religion, shall we say?
So what did it mean? I think we kind of know what it's come to mean, but what did it mean in the 1930s?
Okay, let me see. I've got something on here on that. Let me just Okay, so here's a quote from Hitler himself on what it meant. He says it signified the mission allotted to us, the struggle for the victory of Aryan mankind, and at the same time the triumph of the ideal of creative work, which is in itself and always will be anti-Semitic. So basically, Hitler turned it into this is a quote from Mein Kampf, by the way, and he turned it into a German nationalist symbol is what he did.
What was its background before that? You said a symbol of heraldry?
Yeah, Germans often use that in their heraldry, like in a coat of arms, and just like the French use the fleur de lis, same kind of thing. And another context, it was in Asia. It was used as a mystical symbol, and certain Native American tribes use it as well. It reminds me of this picture I have of a Native American basketball team that had swastikas on their uniform because they considered it like a good luck symbol. And this was well before Hitler. It's a good example of how symbols can mean different things in different contexts.
Yeah. Six. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. And so people should keep that in mind. You know, you get people that basically act like they have some stable, non-moving meaning in all contexts or something. El Cacho says that he hid his hatred behind Christianity. He wanted a Christian nation with Germany for Germans, no immigrants, especially Jews, who would take over. He called it a Christian movement. Did the man call what he was doing a Christian movement? Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, essentially he did, although he meant positive Christian. And
For
I would agree with this sentiment that was just posted here. Yeah, in essence,
Okay.
it's a summary statement, but it's accurate enough as far as it goes.
For those just joining us, we've been talking for a little bit here. How do you define positive Christianity and differentiate it from Orthodox?
Okay, so the positive Christian movement, which was around in Germany before Hitler was alive, uh, had three basic points where it deviated with mainstream Christianity. The first being they did not believe Jesus was Jewish. They believed that he was a member of the Aryan, Aryan, master race. Second, they believed in a severely edited Bible that did not include the New Testament and did not include certain parts of the New Testament, did not include the Old Testament, and did not include parts of the New Testament that they thought were too Jewish for their taste, like the Gospel of Matthew. And then there was a strong emphasis on works and performance and doing good deeds. I don't know that you call it a works salvation exactly, but they certainly gave more importance to works than the average mainstream Christian.
Where did this flourish at? Where was this popping?
This was Germany in the mid 1800s is where we first see the signs of it coming forward.
Who
And
are some proponents or writers? If we were going to understand.
that's one of the points I made in my article and my book is that you can't really find any specific names. It was more like a grassroots kind of movement.
Okay. Thank you very much to David for the super chat. David Harding Jr. He says that I'm an Ashkenazi on my dad's side, so I lean towards Messianic synagogues, and Radar Apologetics is my number one channel. That's great, David. I love what he does. He does great work. Thank you for the super chat. And he says, I was in a Norse mythology religion before Yeshua got a hold of me. Well, praise God, and we're glad you're here with us in more ways than one. Okay, so JP, if you had to guess or predict, what do you think what do you think this man would have done if he got empowered? Do you think he would have, as far as the religious element goes, like, do you have a sense that you can guess based on something he said or did? Like, let's say he got empowered, then what would he be saying about the Christian church, or then what would he be pushing if you had to kind of guess based on what you know about him?
Yeah, well, I do have a whole chapter on that subject, but let me go ahead and sum it up. It seems pretty clear that once he got in power, consolidated, assuming he won the Second World War, which thankfully he did not, but had he done so, there would have been a more direct program to get maybe not, in some cases get rid of the church if they were causing too much trouble, as was done with Dietrich Bonhoeffer. But for the most part, though, they prefer trying to quote convert the church to their way. Hitler preferred to try and use the church for his own ends and try and get them to cooperate. Anyone who didn't cooperate ended up on the chopping block. But there was definitely a program of change in the wind had he been victorious.
Vic says, first time I'm actually hearing AH being connected to Christianity in any way. All the docs I've seen suggested he created his own religion. Who are the people out there, JP, who are trying to connect this man to Christianity? Who's responsible for this monstrosity?
I've found people doing it for decades, but it's very easy to do by taking some of those direct quotes we mentioned, where he self-identified as a Christian, and then stopping your research there without bothering to look any further to find out what he meant by that. It's a great irritant to me that people assume you can just say, well, he says he's a Christian, therefore he is one. It gets to the point. I like to use the example of Mahatma Gandhi, who says, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, and he said he was all those things. Well, which of those was he? Because, I mean, he can't be all of them.
Right.
Or, like, can you be a Christian and just believe in Romans 7:5?
Right.
Yeah.
But he wasn't, you don't think you could properly define him as an atheist, of course, right?
No. He wasn't an atheist. I mean, he believed in some kind of God, but it was not the one that we would recognize. I see no evidence that he was he was an atheist at any given time.
Okay, so what do you believe are some things in your book on this subject, Hitler's Christianity, that maybe we haven't talked about yet, or that you feel should be brought out? And before you do that, real quick, shout out to the moderators, Nate2, D2, D New. You guys literally are the best. I don't tell you enough, and I truly mean it. And that's coming straight from the world's best boss. And shout out to Sunday Vibes, who makes great music in the lo-fi style and is a supporter of the channel. Okay, JP, that question, what do we need to bring out from your book that hasn't been discussed or brought out enough?
Well, aside from the topics that we've already discussed, I think one of the more valuable things you'll see as well is I have a chapter on not just Hitler's beliefs, but also the beliefs of each of the early Nazi leaders. I go into depth on all of them, not just Himmler and not just Hitler, but also Goering, also Albert Speer, and Alfred Rosenberg. Some of the lesser names that you don't always hear every day. That I went through and found spiritual biographies on each and every one of them. that was one of the more difficult things to do. And I do have a chapter too on, like, how do you deal with the claim that well, Hitler said he was a Christian, therefore he was one, and that alludes to what I was saying a few moments ago. Like, self-identification is not a sufficient argument. You have to understand what they mean and to define it out. Otherwise, it's far too simple. But I go into great detail as well on the different religious movements in Germany at the time and how they played things out. The Catholic Church, the German Christians, as well as the church, the group that Bonhoeffer belonged to, the ones who confessed a more orthodox belief and actually fought to some extent against the movement that Hitler was trying to promote.
Let's talk about that real brief. Hold on. Shout out to Crimson Worm Apologetics. He likes the new background. We're still working through some things, but I appreciate that, brother. I'd like to check out your channel sometime if I haven't already. Excuse me if I forgot. And then also shout out to Yondell for a fantastic super chat. Watch out. It's going to get a little loud here, JP. Got to give my man some props. What's the difference with the different churches as far as their names and titles and what they're practicing that are in Germany in the 30s and 40s? Because you just mentioned Bonhoeffer. We've talked about the confessional. Help people understand that landscape a little bit better, please.
Yeah. Okay. So there's the three main groups I considered as profiled were the German Christians, and that was the group, sort of sector of Protestantism that followed the positive Christian movement and those three deviations that I spoke about. The German Catholic Church was another major power, and then you had the Confessing Church, as it was formerly called, which included people like Bonhoeffer, but it was also those within the Protestant and even the Catholic tradition who didn't adhere to anything that the German Christians were promoting. So they were like you might say, a counter movement within the cult, shall we say, trying to get things back to where they should have been.
What was this man's connection to Rome and Roman Catholicism, if any?
Really none. I mean, he was, he may have been baptized as a Catholic, but he didn't follow through with that. There was a certain, there was a certain like nominal sense in which people say he could still be a Catholic because he was never excommunicated. Well, they never they never excommunicated anyone because they always hoped that they might come back from whatever evil that they were doing. There was always this hope that they might repent. Maybe that's a little too hopeful in Hitler's case, but yeah, that's why he was never specifically excommunicated by a formal movement, because they just didn't do that. That's just not the way they did things.
James
Although
says, "Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead."
I saw some indication that he would have been excommunicated automatically for some of the things he did anyway. So that's an interesting debate in itself.
James says anything that may make people think he was a Christian is the Catholic Church. That's because of how much the Pope was seeing him.
Seeing him, I mean, visiting him in person, no. No, I mean, I never found that. I mean, there's some pictures of him shaking hands with somebody. Some people think that's the Pope. That's not the Pope.
You remember who it is?
Let me see. I've got it here.
So you're saying there's a picture. Sometimes people say, "Hey, this is the Pope," but it ain't the Pope.
Yeah, it's not the Pope. It's actually some other Catholic official. I didn't make a note of who it was. I think it was one of the bishops. But as I point out, Dalai Lama shook hands with John Paul II. So does that mean Dalai Lama is no longer a Buddhist?
Right.
No, it doesn't. No.
Interesting movie I saw back in the day with Gregory Peck. It was called The Scarlet and the Gray. Scarlet and Gray, I think, was the name. And it was about when those socialist guys basically took over Italy. They thought Mussolini wasn't doing enough or something. And they kind of hemmed in the Vatican. And there was a priest there, I guess, who actually was helping Jewish people escape right under the nose of the Nazis during this time. And it's like a really fascinating film. And I looked it up, and like any film, there's some historical inaccuracies, but my understanding is it's basically a correct tale, and it's actually a pretty interesting, inspirational, and kind of humorous one. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's something I'd encourage people. You want to watch an old school movie that's good, that has some historical element, watch Scarlet and Gray with Gregory Peck about this issue. And this is coming from, I'm going to go ahead and just out myself to those who are new to the channel, a Calvinist myself. So I'm giving a Roman Catholic person, at least in film portrayal, some props. So, we can do it every once in a while.
A good real life example that I've always admired is Corrie ten Boom and her story.
Yeah,
she did the same thing in real life. Yeah,
great example. I read that book to my kids, and yeah, really good stuff. Or a book about Corrie ten Boom. I don't know what that book, but I forgot now the title. I don't think it was the famous one. It was a book for kids. Mike B says, some One-Westers, these are Hebrew Israelites, by the way, believe Hitler was ethnically Jewish, but that's not true. He did have a distant ancestor who was Jewish, however. Thoughts?
That may be true. I mean, that's not unlikely. There was a certain I know that some Jews had to, because of persecution, they had to pretend to be other than Jews, and so they ended up intermarrying, and so that could be one way that there was just some Jewish ancestry for them. That's not impossible, certainly.
Mayan Stevenson says One-Westers. Now, One-Westers are what I usually deal with on this channel, JP. It's a certain section of the Hebrew Israelite movement. Mayan Stevenson points out that One-Westers believe in a conspiracy that Hitler persecuted the Jews because he secretly knew that the true ethnic Jews are blacks, Native Americans, and Spanish. Now, Mayan, your comment is partially correct. I'll just tell you, JP, what it is really quick. There is a quote that has been floating around on the internet again that has this conversation supposedly between Hitler and some private in his army, and he says the America has God's jewels, and that had some kind of weird connection where he said he was going to be vindicated by what he was doing to the Jews in his midst, because the actual Jews are the black folks in America. Now, Mayan, he never said Native Americans and Hispanics, so that's incorrect on your part. Now, by the way, he never said the actual quote either, but I'm saying that the false quote that gets bandied about, it's even been done with by Snopes, and not that they get everything right, but they got this right. It's a false quote, but even in the false quote, he didn't say what you said. You're actually elaborating on a quote that's already false. I don't know if you've seen that, but actually it was shared in the documentary that Kyrie Irving, the famous basketball player, he shared the Hebrews to Negroes, the link on Twitter that got him in big trouble a couple years ago. I don't know if you remember this kerfuffle. And in that, the documentary had that quote in there. And so a lot of people pointed out, yo, you get this documentary. I don't know if you know anything I'm talking about, JP, but that's what's going on.
I found some things about it just while you were talking about it. It's like that's the Conspiracy of the Month. I don't subscribe to that magazine.
Yeah, no doubt. Jonathan says, and let me get your hairs, your cackles raised. I think that's the old people used to say that. I really don't think this godly gentleman did quite enough research on the Roman connection to Hitler.
Well, then the scholars I used as sources didn't either, which I find hard to believe.
Yeah. So, so that's what they say. Hey, we're not trying to give Rome a pass on anything. The question is just, was that the case? There's always more to be researched and done, but we're just trying to be fair here is all we're trying to do. Particular says he murdered 6 million Jews. He murdered over 12 million Christians. I don't know if I don't know if everyone out of the 12, we could call them all Christians.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever they were, he was responsible for it. So 18 million death penalties, and that would just be a start.
Okay, so you've seen some comments and all of that. What do you want to leave people with, JP? Because, there's a lot on this topic, and I know sometimes you get exasperated tracking them all down and chasing them all down. But what do you want to help people? What, let's say you want to talk to the Christians in the audience, and you want them to be wise in how they approach this. What do you want to teach them and tell them?
I want to say, don't get your stuff off the internet. Don't get it off of Reddit. Don't get it off of discussion forums. Get it off of scholars. Get it off of people who have actually done the work and who actually are credentialed in the field and have studied this issue. That's what I did. And although there's always new findings, this Kurlander fellow looks very interesting. It looks like he has more that will support and maybe elaborate upon some of the things that I was talking about. And there are probably some more books I could stand to get into. Maybe I'll eventually have time to do that. But by all means, go with reliable sources. That's one thing I could tell people again and again. There's so much bad information out there. It's just been getting worse and worse. There's a book I like to recommend in particular and close, if I may. And if you go to my website, tectonics.org, you'll see a link right on the front page to a review I did of it for the Christian Research Journal. Let me just go ahead and pull that up real quick so I can have a direct look at that. It'll be in the upper right corner. Of course, now my internet chooses to be very slow on me. So
tectonics.org, you guys may not know, this is a site that JP put articles and videos on for more than a decade, I think. And it's got all kinds of great stuff. He's not really currently updating it anymore, is my understanding, but it's got an archive of fantastic materials. And especially things related to one of his strong suits, which is shattering the Christ myth. So I just want to encourage people. It's older, so it may not come up in your searches, but you don't want to forget about tectonics.org when you check out topics because he's done so much work. And so I just want to give a shout out on that. But go ahead, brother. What were you saying?
Okay, yeah, I got the book title. It's the book I reviewed for the Christian Research Journal is The Death of Expertise. And I've got a link to the review in the upper right corner of the site under special highlighted item. That I would recommend that book very strongly for anyone who wants to understand more about the crisis in information and misinformation, and where you really need to go for your information instead.
Yeah, actually, so I do. I remember hearing about that book, and I always put it on my to-do list and never got around to it. But I heard The Death of Expertise is a really good book.
It's excellent. It's absolutely excellent. And thank you, Thrifty Trader. It's my pleasure. I like the story that Tom Nichols, the author of Death of Expertise, gave in there that really exemplifies all of this. He talks about how the world's leading expert in sarin gas offered to help someone with her project on this, with her project. And he corrected her on a couple of things she was doing wrong, and she just got upset with him and would refuse to respect his expertise. She just assumed that he was just causing trouble. And that's what's going on now, is people are not being respected for what they've learned and what they've done. And so we've got people becoming authorities who don't deserve to be authorities.
Yeah, bad stuff. Yeah. Bad stuff. Particular, real quick, wasn't doubting the figure as far as how many Hitler murdered. I was saying I don't know if you could say the 12 million were all Christians per se. That's what I was sort of like. Well, I don't know about that element of it alone. Yes, he did indeed kill Christians, no doubt. But that was the only thing I was kind of wondering about. I don't know about that, and I just want to bring that out. Shout out to Dr. Bob. He knows a lot. He does some great stuff. Great stuff there. Thoroughly Unoriginal says, can I put the link up? Nate, can you grab the Tectonics link for JP's site? And what is the story with Tectonics not updating it right, but you're leaving it up for archive purposes? Is that correct?
Yeah, right. I've posted not too long ago. I posted a thing saying the site Canaan is closed. I did go through and update all my articles. I looked over every one of them between like 2020 and 2022 to see if I needed to update any of them, see if I had any more information I wanted to add. But what you'll see on the front of the page now sort of summarizes all the things I've done over the time that I was updating it, which was between 1998 and about 2016, 2017 or thereabouts. And
so you're a cessationist then.
A cessation. I cessated my site. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, the canon is. I'm just messing with you, man.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, hey,
one of the other things I'll bring attention to for fun. I mean, one of the things I used to do and enjoy very much is making animated videos. And I was old school. I can't do it anymore because of my arthritis, but I used to hand draw animated videos. And on the bottom of the page there, you'll see a featured one. One of my favorite ones ever was a parody of Storage Wars called Storage Wars Jerusalem, where atheists and other doubters were looking for in storage units for artifacts that would debunk Christianity.
Yeah, I watched some of your videos back then. I like the ones where you would have, I think, like these other gods, in relationship to the Christ myth. I think there was one with maybe Mithras or one of those I liked a lot.
Yeah. There was a live one where I actually had one of my friends, Brent Hardaway, dressed as Mithra. And I dressed up as Jamie from Mythbusters, and we called it the Mithra Buster.
Yeah. See, that's some good stuff, man. Well, I hope you feel encouraged. All the good stuff you've done over time, and we want to give you your flowers. And it's beautiful to see your contribution, still being appreciated and made about an important topic. Guys, pick up the book. We can't cover everything here today, but the book will really help you. The articles at Tecton. Did you drop that? Okay, he dropped the link. Yeah, we got to pin that. Tectonics.org. The idea there is building something. Tectonics.org. Some really good stuff. But guys, pretty soon I'm going to try to get into some shows coming up. I'm working on a smoke room coming up where we take questions. And I'm also working on a show actually about who are the Edomites. That's going to be a good one. So I'm looking forward to these. God bless, guys. Peace out. Have a beautiful night. Thanks for joining Street Apologist Live.
Whoa. Radio time. Whoa. You're now listening to Street Apologist. Street Apologist. Street Apologist. Street Apologist. Street Apologist. Street Apologist. Street Apologist.